What's the most petty thing a neighbor has done to you? Stole the windshield wipers off of my car. I caught him on a security camera stealing them one night. Next day I went over to his house and told that some lowlife stole my damn wipers. The look he gave me was priceless. Don't think he liked me calling him a lowlife. After I told him I had him on video, he goes, fine, take them back, and that was the last time I spoke to him. I had a neighbor who I had never met continue to throw dead animal carcasses in my yard. This went on for several months. Rabbit, possum, squirrel, raccoon, you name it. One day, I witnessed him doing it, and this was how I determined who was actually performing this strange act. He was probably in his 60s. He opened his garage door, walked out with a pitchfork and something dead on it, then proceeded to yuck it in my front lawn. I waited until that night, picked it up and hurled it onto his car's windshield. He never did it again. My other neighbor, who I eventually met, said he had some feud with the previous owner of my house. I guess he never realized I wasn't the guy he feuded with. A dorm neighbor was a huge dick and didn't care for anyone in the suite. So he did something like tip over his subwoofer, turned the music up and left for the weekend. The entire crew could feel it from our beds. I guess he didn't know that RAs have keys to the rooms. Maybe he also didn't know that you could get ejected from dorms. Fuck you, Bosco. You turd. He had a tree in his yard that threw a lot of shade on my side, which eventually killed everything that was growing there. So I spent a lot of time and money to plant a beautiful shade garden. He watched me the entire time, asking questions about the plants and how much they cost. The following spring, he cut the fucking tree down. I was at this neighborhood treasure hunt when I was around 11. It was in a big park with lot of trees and rocks, parking lot and a community center next to it. Me and my neighbor's kid both figured out final clue and sprinted towards the finish, only for me to accidentally bumped by his dad in full. Still salty about it till this day. My neighbor would put on house music at loud volume for his stereo, then leave for the night. It was mildly annoying in certain parts of my home. So I bought some Sewin Vega 15s and played the same song back. Literally the same song, over and over and over, while I went on vacation for 4 days. I'm not sure who was the bigger dick, but we both stopped doing it after that. Later, when he was throwing a party, he asked if he could use my speakers cause they loud af. Edit, whoa, lots of love. For anyone wondering, they were at 100s like these. Vega makes goodish. Highly recommend. https://www. eBay.com ITM Sewin Vega at 100 at 15 3-way floor speaker 15 woofers reconditioned to 124,584,965,929. Trexit equals P2,349,624. M46,890. L49,286. About 10 years ago, had a neighbor scream at me because I accidentally went onto his property a little bit when I was mowing the lawn. A grown man yelling at her 11-year-old over a bit of cut grass. Stole my trash bin because theirs got repossessed for lack of payment. Dumbasses thought I wouldn't know it was them. Trash collection company took my old trash bin away from them, gave me a brand new one, and gave me a credit for having to deal with all this bullshit. When I was a kid, my brother and I were playing catch in the yard. Our ball ended up in the neighbor's yard, nowhere near the house, like 5 feet into his grass, and I went to get it. He comes running outside yelling, saying if I ever see you on my grass again, I'm calling the cops. No kidding. The whole get off my yard kid thing. People in the building were complaining that he didn't pick up after his dog. All of the apartments except mine were accessible behind a security door. Mine opened right onto the porch. One day I came home from work and saw he wrote this huge note in thick Sharpie that said, "Clean up after your dog." He must have told the neighbors it was me, and left that note so that they could all see it really was me, to prove his point. Except it wasn't me. It was him. We had our lot assessed and they put stakes in the ground on the property line. She pulled them up and moved them 2 inches over. It was very noticeable because they also made a small spray painted line along the stakes. I guess she didn't think we would notice that the stakes were no longer on the line. Mine was a downstairs neighbor and they would constantly switch the dryer plug to our outlet to charge our unit for drying their clothes. We were sort of that neighbor a few years ago. We were in the process of building our new house and had everything staked out before any of the groundwork started. I guess our neighbor thought we were too close to their property and had some city official come out to measure and in the process delayed our contractor. Turns out we were 1 foot further away from their property than necessary and so, without even bothering to ask, our annoyed contractor picked up all the stakes and moved them 1 foot closer to the neighbor. I currently have a neighbor who blares his music so loudly it rattles my entire apartment. He's had numerous lease violations against him. Hasn't paid his rent since last March. And thinks somehow he is punishing the apartment complex instead of everyone around him. Luckily the housing courts open back up soon and he has a date set for next month. The eviction moratorium has also made it really hard to get people into housing courts for other reasons. I will be glad when I no longer get home from work and see him chugging Keystone Ice outside at 8 o'clock in the morning while he's blaring music out of 2 DJ speakers. Parked his ugly ass truck on the street right in front of my house and left it there for a year. Water people were out checking meters. Water guy asked me where our meter was, showed him where it was at. But piker neighbor comes out of his house hollering to the world that was his meter and I was not to touch it. We shared the in-ground meter thingy. 2 separate meters. Water guy had a good laugh and instructed the neighbor that it was indeed where my meter was. Neighbor was embarrassed at his own behavior and went back into his house but watched us for a bit. They were sort of weird. Always remember that they smelled like dirty bedsheets. Andersonus land. My college roommate and I had an ant problem. They got all over the trash bin. So we moved it from the garage to the yard in front of the house. Our neighbor left us a note saying it was unsightly and to please remove it. I handled the situation by putting a sticky Christmas bough on top of it to make it look nicer. My roommate was horrified by me and took it off. She then explained to the neighbor why we had it outside. I'm not sure which one of us was pettiest, me or the neighbor. Our neighbors constantly complained for like 2 years about a tree in the backyard that looked like it was going to fall. They threatened to sue us if it did. Thing is, the tree was clearly on their property. Like by 5 feet. Then one day during a strong storm, a huge, seemingly strong and healthy tree, smack dab in the middle of their front yard blows over onto their house. We went over the next day and helped them cut it up and remove it. They could barely make eye contact with us and never said thank you. They did shut up about the other tree though. That's still standing to this day. My neighbors play loud music and yell at each other quite frequently. Recently they realized they can turn the stereo into a PA and now scream obscenities at each other through the microphone. Lovely. Growing up, we had a neighbor with an immaculate lawn and home. He kept it that way by flicking his cigarette butts over the fence and into our yard. To him, we were just white trash. One day, my mom picked up all the butts from our yard and flung them back into his yard. Problem solved. He never did it again. Stolen my green trash can. What the fuck am I going to do? Go up to them and accuse them of doing it? They only had one. But I knew they fucking did it. But what if I was wrong? Would have been mortifying. Just unbelievably petty and shady. Smeared fesses on my doorknob. Wacko neighbor was convinced that we had stolen his lawnmower. Of course we didn't. He ranted and raved about this but we just tuned him out because we thought he was a harmless crackhead. One day he comes over in a panic and asks to borrow our lawnmower because his landlord was coming and if the lawn wasn't mowed, he'd be evicted. At the time we lived on a dead-end street with 6 houses. What was the harm? He mowed his lawn then promptly hid it in his back shed and denied ever borrowing it. Before it could escalate to anything. He was arrested for molesting his teenage stepdaughter and we got our lawnmower back. Called DCYF on us a week before Christmas when I was 32 weeks pregnant with my youngest. Apparently my husband bringing a 6-pack of beer home means he was caring for our then 3-year-old and 18-month-old drunk. The case was closed a week after the youngest was born. And yes, that old miserable prick still lives across the road from us. Called CPS on my family because we took a family vacation with our 2 older kids and let our youngest with special behavioral needs and violent outbursts spend the week with my mom. They did movies, swimming pools, children's museums, a food truck festival, and a fireworks show together in that time. He had a blast. And the rest of us got some badly needed respite. Neighbor thought it was blatant favoritism and reported us. Poisoned my cat and a lot of other neighborhood cats. I still can't get over him. He was a great cat. I loved him so much. That fucking witch also called the cops on my family about a septic tank or something instead of coming to our door and talking about it like a person. There was nothing wrong with the septic tank. Poisoned the area where she knew our chickens grazed. Right at the fence line. On our side. And yes. One of our chickens died because of that. Edit, we only owned hens. Not roosters. My upstairs neighbor, in an apartment, was peeved that I contacted the office about him and his loud wife. I had no contact with them directly. So this grown man waited until I took my 15-year-old, blind, dying of cancer dog outside to relieve himself. And he came out to loudly bark and growl at my dog to scare him since he couldn't see. Luckily, my dog didn't care. But what a petty thing to do. Had his police cronies harass me and my family for weeks on end. Called DCFS making false claims. Pointed 3 security cameras into my house and yard. I wouldn't fix her vibrator and so she reported me to housing that I was harassing her. Put rotting vegetables under the roof rack on my dad's car. Stunk like hell. Threw balls of mud at our backyard. Doesn't sound so bad but it was an insane amount of mud. Our backyard chairs were ruined. We caught my neighbor leaning out his upstairs window throwing open ink cartridges at our washing. He was barking mad and a few years ago got sectioned after trying to kill his wife. I'm pretty sure he also staged a fake home invasion for insurance money at one point. I am also fairly certain it was him that was shooting my cats. 2 had airgun pellets embedded in their heads. 1. Threatened to sue my mom because she feeds the squirrels in the morning. And he had squirrels inside his roof. 2. Called the cops on us because my mom accidentally took his garbage bin after our street flooded, thinking that it was hers when it was actually his. After the squirrel incident, they haven't spoken a word to each other. And apparently he was too scared to come knock on our door and ask for his garbage bin back. Deleted. We have a front yard garden and our neighbors across the street have one of those overkept yards where they have a lawn service come by twice a week. They passive-aggressively called the health department on us. The health inspector showed up and was laughing because they had made it sound like we had a dilapidated shack infested with vermin. Not to me but to other neighbors. I lived in an apartment and we shared our trash cans with everyone in the building, 60 apartments. Someone, and we still don't know who it was, would go through the trash and take out envelopes from letters that were sent to people living in the building. They were so angry about people not putting them in the can for paper that they took every single one where a name on it and put it in that person's mailbox. Dirty paper from a trash can. Should also mention that some of these envelopes contain small pieces of plastic and have this glue strip on them which you would need to separate before throwing them in the paper trash can, so it wasn't unreasonable to just throw them away with the other trash. He's salty about a land survey that was done decades before I moved in. We have a decent neighborly relationship in general. But when I moved in he tried to convince me that a whole section of my yard was his. Fortunately, the previous owner had warned me he might try this. Now we rent the house out. Every time a new tenant moves in, He walks the property with them and tries to move the property line again. Very petty. And so consistent. Happened a couple years ago. But we currently live in an apartment and currently occupy the space above our neighbor before they moved out. Every bump or small noise we would make, vacuuming during the day or else putting dishes away, she would call to complain. Not necessarily angrily, but in a very passive "wow haha, you are making quite a bit of noise up there, haha, what are you up to?" Even called around 10-11 p.m. when we flushed the toilet. Last summer our neighbor complained that our maple tree, the only tree in our entire yard, was dying, and he contacted his insurance company to make sure we'd have to pay damages if it ever fell over onto his garage. We had an expert out and it was dying, so we sadly chose to have it cut down. During this fall he got his leaf blower out every single day and blew the leaves from his yard into ours, even though you now have no trees. Joke's on him. We just signed a contract for a fence. For our dog. Not out of pettiness. But it's a nice bonus. Spent thousands of dollars removing 2 very large trees from our property. About a month later the neighbor sent us certified mail claiming one of the trees we did not cut down was not healthy. Of course this was not true because I had all the trees inspected before removal. Because they sent us certified mail, it forced us to get an umbrella insurance policy to cover the event of the tree falling on their house. They never had one face-to-face conversation with us about it. When the fuck did people stop acting like neighbors? Throwing sweet potatoes at the back fence at 5:30 a.m. Or maybe it was deliberately walking onto my property at 5:30 a.m. and having a phone conversation that I could hear quite clearly from the other side of the house. Then again, perhaps it's when they set the irrigation so it waters the whole side of my house and 5 meters into my yard over the 5 meters high back fence. It also lands on the roof of my 4 meters high shed. It could have been waiting for the wind to change so the smoke from his 200-hectare trash blanket fire would saturate my property for the next 3 hours. He said he was just waiting for the wind to change when he came to fulfill his legal duty of informing his neighbors that he was about to light a large fire. The Catholic deacon living across the street from me told me to go to confession after my husband and I divorced. Vegan neighbor called cops on me because me barbecuing on my backyard was making her property smelly. And she demonstrated to the cops how bad the smell is by standing next to the fence. It wasn't done directly to me. More a petty thing towards the entire street. As a kid, I lived on a tiny dead-end street with limited parking and very few driveways. So everyone had to pay for a parking permit if they wanted to park on the street. But there was an older gentleman at the corner who had a driveway that could easily fit 4 cars. He repaved it every year and hosed it down every day in the summer. And he also paid to take the only extra spot on the street. Not once did he park in that driveway. And he yelled and chased the kids away if any of them walked onto it. He was a very strange man. I remember my friends and I stealing one of his zucchinis in retaliation. So I suppose the pettiness went both ways, lol. My neighbor, who's also my aunt, said to my mom that I said that I wouldn't play with my cousin anymore because I was white and he was black. I don't remember saying this whatsoever. But I was only 6, so I don't remember anything actually. The thing is that my mom beat me over it. He leaves his hose on full blast right next to the fence to flood our yard. Called the cops because we parked a car on the street in front of her house overnight. It's not illegal to park on the street. She didn't park anywhere except in her garage. And she never had guests. The car could not be seen from inside her house unless she came outside. So anyway, the sheriff's deputy came out and basically told her never to call for such bullshit ever again or she'd be facing charges. We know this happened because the deputy let us know when he came by to tell us it was okay to park there when we needed to. We got reported because the grass got a cm too long. And who would know this better than our neighbor? She also called the animal rescue because we supposedly starved our dog and chained him outside too long. Our dog loved being outside and the only time we used the long chain leash was when he needed to do his business. We didn't have fences up. Officer took one look at our happy dog and told us we have shitty neighbors. We had a lot of snow and our snowblower broke. So we were all out shoveling. We shared a driveway with our neighbor. We had a long driveway that split off near the end to each of our houses. He pulled out his snowblower and did the very bare minimum of the shared driveway. Only really doing his side and stopping as soon as our driveway merged. He made eye contact with me. A teenager digging through 2 feet of snow with a dinky red shovel. And then without a word turned around and put his snowblower in the garage. He left us to manually shovel the whole rest of the driveway by ourselves. Neighbor jumped the fence and opened our back gate, letting the dogs out. Thankfully our dogs stayed in the yard. But the roommate's dog disappeared for hours. The guy left a note on the door saying we were bad pet owners because we left our dogs out all day and didn't deserve to have them. All day was the 6 hours a day I was working at the time. We didn't know it was him until we started talking to other neighbors and one checked their security camera which caught him going up to our door. Then jumping our fence. He kicked my fence. But then I said it was too bad the heart attack didn't kill him, so I suppose I'm the petty one in this story. We were having a fire in our backyard and our neighbors called the fire department saying we started a fire and it got out of hand. It was a small pit fire, so the FD rushed 2 rescues to our house just to put out a little fire. Yes, our neighbors got fined for wasting the FD's time. I mowed the lawn at 9 AM on a Saturday. He mowed the lawn at 11 PM on Monday in the pitch black with a flashlight. Threatened to sue because I accidentally mowed a foot-wide stripe of their lawn. Called the cops on me for being in my own yard with a flashlight after dark. Doorbell rings. I get out of bed to see who has come to see me. Me at door in boxers, yes. Cop, I got a call of a suspicious person in your yard. Me, it was probably me. I just came in from walking the dog. Cop, I'm so sorry for wasting your time. I don't really interact with my neighbors much. But one time I waved at them and they didn't wave back. The nerve of some people. Sprays down his boat. Every day. Right next to my lawn. Boat on concrete. Water runs onto my lawn. Then calls the city to complain when weeds grass reach 6 inches. I once had a neighbor cut exhaust hangers on a truck of mine, which caused the exhaust to break off. They then proceeded to call 911 and report my vehicle to the police, saying I was speeding through the neighborhood. It was a 1991 Toyota Land Cruiser, and physically couldn't accelerate to the speeds they claimed I was going. When the police showed up to investigate, I showed them the cut hangers and explained the 155 HP engine couldn't push the 6,500-pound truck up the hill more than 20 miles per hour. The officers left immediately and never bothered me again. I moved out as soon as the lease expired. But I still do regular 2 AM first gear passes through the area to make sure they know how much I hate them all. There is a median in the road in front of our house. My brother lives almost right across the street from me, so I often walk down my sidewalk, cross the street and cross the median in front of my neighbor's house to get there. She has asked me not to walk on her part of the median. 10 years ago my neighbor's garage band was jamming super loudly at around 9:30 PM. Typically it doesn't bug me too much, but on that night they decided to open the garage door because it was a hot summer night and it was too hot, which is only their problem. My 1-year-old couldn't sleep because of how loud they were. So I went over to ask if they could play quieter and shut the garage door. He hasn't spoken to me in 10 years and is an asshole to my kids when he sees them. He is mean to an 8 and 11-year-old because 10 years ago I asked him and his band to play their music quieter at 9:30 PM. Edit, word. Quieter, not whiter. Dumped trash all over our porch after my mother confronted her for calling the police due to loud music. We lived in row houses and she was 2 doors down. My mother had gospel music on to clean the house, but she wasn't blaring it as if we were having a house party. Also called us welfare recipients despite the fact she was also receiving welfare. The neighbor blasted music with heavy bass through our very thin shared wall. So I blasted Cotton Eye Joe, the remix version if that matters, as loud as I could through my wall. Funny how the music turned down after that. Grimacing face, face with tears of joy. I'm the neighbor, petty neighbor. People across the street had friends coming and going all day and night. So as to not appear as they had any company, they instructed their guests to park in front of any house but theirs. I adjusted my sprinklers to water a little past the grass. I have well water that leaves super bad water spots. Even a dirty car will be made worse by this well water. When certain extra irritating repeat visitors parked in front of my house, it was suddenly time to run the sprinklers. It actually worked too. We bought the house and started renovating. So we put up a new brown plank fence all the way up to our neighbor's white picket fence. Turns out the last board is technically on the neighbor's property. They let us know by painting just that last single plank white. They'd also constantly call noise complaints on us because of the Renos. We were playing football on a public street. Ball rolled close to his car. He picked it up, put it behind the tire of his car and backed over it and popped it. No worries. We bided our time and then took care of it. Filed more code violation complaints for a property with 0 violations than anyone in my county ever had. I sold. Fuck Russ Barnes. What a douche. I hope he's dead. His ex-neighbor on the other side feels the exact same way. Took my parents to court over the fence they put in being like an inch over their property line. It was not. My parents won and got a restraining order against them. We had a small dirt driveway in front of our lawn, which was shaded by our giant tree. The neighbors liked to park there because they always had people over and apparently it was too difficult for them to park near their house. When I got my horse trailer, Gooseneck, so think lung, it was a lot easier for me to park in the front so I could just load up and go. One day I come out and see that my tire is slashed on the trailer. I looked up and they were laughing. Joke was on them. They thought I could buy a new tire. Boo it, I couldn't. So that trailer didn't move for months until I could. I lived in a bunch of townhomes. Someone would empty their kitty litter into a bag then drag it to the trash. About halfway through the walk it would start leaving litter and turds on the sidewalk. One night we finally saw who it was. My roommate hopped in the dumpster, grabbed the bag which was mostly full, went to their house, tied it to the doorknob, cut the bottom with his knife, knocked and ran. They opened the door and dragged kitty litter and all the garbage that was on top of it right into their house. They stopped dragging the bag to the trash after that. Once a person stole my bike from the backyard, then left a worse bike in its place. Well, let's see. He anonymously reported my trailer to the hoer and then asked to borrow it. His dog chewed up my son's archery target after the neighbor asked to borrow it and then he didn't offer to replace it. He never in 8 years replaced a fence picket even though his kids were busting them and it was a shared fence line. He would dump his grass clippings on our property. He would borrow things and return them empty or broken. Man, now that I put it in writing, I am glad that dude moved. When I was a kid we had a crazy old cat lady that would take our newspapers every day, so my mom thought it would be a great idea to sabotage an old newspaper by wrapping it up in dog shit, mustard, sauerkraut, dirt, basically anything we could find in hopes that she'd stop taking them. We planted the newspaper and woke up to it being gone. Even after all of that, she still fucking took it after that. The dedication told us she deserved it, Lomfeo. They continued calling the hoe for fake shit. They were just racist. I think. Because I was being targeted by the hoe prior. The hoe was measuring my grass every couple of days. I wound up filing a lawsuit for harassment to get them both to stop. I was lucky to have a lawyer who owed me a favor. I got my hoe dues paid for a few years. Got refunded fines and lawn care costs. My friend lawyer got paid. Etc. It was a pretty good result in all.